Yo, what is up, YouTube? I actually wasn't planning on making a video today, but since I'm out here by this waterfall, taking a minute to reflect, I figured I'd make a video for anyone who's been curious about wholesaling real estate. So, if you've seen people online talking about flipping paper and making $50,000 a month, and you're wondering if this is even possible, then this video is for you. If you don't know who I am, my name's Gunnar Morgan, and I work for a real estate wholesaling firm. And I learned pretty much all the ins and outs of the business, and now I run my own operation and help other people do the same thing. So in this video, I'm just going to break down how wholesaling works and answer some of the questions that people have been asking me on how the business works. So if you've been thinking about getting into wholesaling real estate, and if you want help putting together a game plan for your business, I put a link in the description where you can book a free one-on-one call with me to go over where you're at and see how we can get your first deal done. But with all that being said, let's jump right into the video. All right, guys, so I have a couple of questions here on my phone that I'm just going to answer. These are questions that I've gotten in my DMs and just common questions that I hear people whenever I go to real estate events ask, or whenever somebody in my family or friends ask me what is wholesaling real estate. These are just some of the questions that come up. So first off, what exactly is wholesaling real estate and how does it work? So wholesaling is essentially just finding really discounted properties, getting them under contract, and then taking that contract, going and finding a buyer who can pay more for the property than what you have it under contract for, and selling it to them for a fee. So a quick example of this, you go out and find a homeowner who wants to sell their property for, let's just say, $100,000. You get that property under contract, and then you go and find a buyer who's willing to pay, let's say, $120,000 for the property that you have under contract for $100,000. You end up making $20,000 on closing day. The second question I see often is, do you need a real estate license or any kind of experience to start wholesaling? So no, not necessarily. You don't need a real estate license at all to get into wholesaling real estate. As far as experience, you're going to want to know like simple terms getting into the business, or else you're just going to go into it completely blind. But just think about it like this. The basics of wholesaling is finding very discounted properties, getting them under contract, going and finding a buyer who's willing to pay more for the property than what you have it under contract for. And if you can consistently do that, you don't necessarily need to know these big fancy terms, or you don't have to have the fanciest equipment set up to do that. All it's going to take is you to be completely relentless, going out and getting these deals under contract and finding buyers who's willing to pay more. That's the basics of the business. And if you can stick to the basics, you'll be further along than most people in this industry. Now, the next question we see is, how much money can someone realistically make starting out, like on their first deal or a few deals? So this is a really good question, because a lot of people get it confused as like you make $10,000 and all of a sudden you're extremely rich. And that's not necessarily how it works. But for example, like we're spending roughly $5,000 to $6,000 a month in marketing, and that's bringing us in about 40 to 50K per month. So our average deal size right now in my company is about $25,000 per deal. So that means for each contract that we get, we're almost sure that we can sell it for $25,000 because of the offer calculator that we use and how we underwrite our deals. Now, we want to shoot for more, and sometimes we can shoot for more with different strategies. Like you have your typical off-market assignments where you just go out and find a cash buyer and you assign the property over to the buyer. But if you know how to do novations, you can essentially get the property under contract with the right wording and list it on the MLS, and you can potentially double your average assignment fee spread. So on a deal where you might make $25,000 selling it to a typical cash buyer, if you put that same property on the MLS, you could potentially make $30,000 to even $50,000 on one single deal. Now, realistically, when you start out, you're probably not going to know how to do novations or anything like that. And that's the point of having a mentor who does know how to do certain things like that, which is what I had. I had a mentor who knew how to do novations, and every single deal that I would get, I would try to maximize my profit by taking that deal to them, so that way they could help me make more money than what I would just selling it to a normal cash buyer. So another question I see all the time is, what's the process of finding motivated sellers, and how do you actually find these deals? This is a good question, because I think going into 2026, there's a lot of marketing that obviously works, but there's also a lot of marketing that I would suggest and say is outdated. Now, what I mean by that is, I think all marketing works, right? But do you want to sit here and make 400 to 500 phone calls just to find one person who might potentially be interested in selling? In my opinion, I don't feel like that's the best use of my time. So yes, if you have the money, you can outsource that and find a cold caller who's willing to make calls for you and then send you the leads that are actually interested in selling. And then your job would be to, do the sales process and get them under contract. However, going into 2026, it's a very competitive industry. So I would suggest, if you have the money to run paid ads, figure out how to run Facebook ads yourself and market to homeowners who are distressed. So running Facebook ads to people who might have just inherited a property, or running Facebook ads to people who might be facing foreclosure, you're more likely to see a better return on that versus spending hours and hours prospecting to people who may or may not be interested in selling. I'd rather have people come to me. So finding these motivated sellers isn't hard if you have the money. However, this is an industry where it takes money to make money. So if you're not comfortable spending money on marketing every single month in order to see a return, then this industry probably isn't for you. Now, this is a question I got not too long ago in my DMs from a new wholesaler who didn't really know what he was doing, and another wholesaler ended up taking advantage of him and scamming him out of a deal. So he asked, what was the biggest mistake that you made when you were first getting started, and how can a new wholesaler avoid the same mistakes? So the number one mistake that I made was spending all of my money that I made. Now, let's say I closed a $25,000 assignment fee. Me not being that smart with my money at the time, I would go down to Miami, party, have fun, and just spend the money before I even made it. Now, it's fun once you get started, but it can eventually spread you thin, and it's not the smartest thing to do once you start making money. So I would say once you make money, be smart with it. And secondly, I would say reinvest for marketing, because marketing is what fuels the business. And without it, if you blow all your money, you're not going to have any money for marketing to bring in more deals. Now, another mistake that I would definitely avoid is posting deals in Facebook groups. Now, Facebook groups can be a good way to find buyers if you vet them properly, but I've had a couple of deals where I posted them in Facebook groups and wholesalers undercut the deal, went to the seller directly, and it was just bad on my part. I could have been a little bit smarter with vetting the buyers, but I've had people undercut me and take advantage of me. So at the end of the day, make sure you vet your buyers correctly. And if you don't know how to do novations is probably the number one way I've been able to avoid that problem entirely, because I don't rely on cash buyers anymore. I just put my deals on the MLS and have cash buyers, families, people who use VA loans, FHA loans, etc. They can now put offers in on the property. And 9 times out of 10, they're going to be accompanied by agents. And some agents are, I'm not going to say all agents, but some agents do bad work. But 9 times out of 10, you're not going to run into an agent who's going to do anything bad to you or try to undercut the deal. Another question I hear all the time that I wrote down was, how can someone go from just learning the basics to actually closing their first deal? I think a lot of people overcomplicate wholesaling real estate in general. I think they focus on getting fancy CRMs and making sure their website's looking good, or making sure they have, the perfect logo, whatever it is. The essence of this business is simply just getting discounted deals under contract and finding someone who's willing to pay more for the property than what you have it under contract for. I know I've said that over and over in this video, but that's literally the basics of this business. And if you can focus on doing that specifically and just building a relationship with these homeowners, at the end of the day, you're trying to convince someone to sell their property to you over the phone or in person, and they don't know who you are. So you want to make sure these homeowners trust you and trust that you can actually solve their issue. So if you could just focus on the basics of this business, like I said earlier, you'll go a lot further than 99% of the people in this industry. So for anyone watching this video who's curious on what the next steps they should take is, like I said in the beginning of this call, there's a link in the description to book a free one-on-one call with me where I will personally look at where you're at in the business and see how I can help you either get your first deal or see how I can help you scale to $20,000, $30,000 per month consistently. So I hope this video brought you guys some sort of value. If you have any questions, you can DM me directly on Instagram or just leave a comment down below. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and I will see you guys in the next video.